Chad Johnson didn't mince words. For him, Stefanski's play calling wasn't just questionable, it looked intentional. Why else would you sideline a red-hot Shedeur Sanders in a make-or-break scenario? This was a rookie quarterback making NFL history in just his third start, showing poise, accuracy, and mobility beyond his years. And yet, the Browns' coaching staff pulled him at the peak of his performance, opting for a gimmick over trust. Johnson's tone was one of skepticism, not about Sanders, but about the organization behind him.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
That kind of decision fuels suspicions about deeper motives. Johnson hints at the possibility of internal sabotage, or at least strategic manipulation that doesn't align with developing a promising QB. Sanders' future hinges on being supported and not sidelined. The fears that the Browns, intentionally or not, are limiting his growth with choices rooted in politics instead of performance. And that could derail a career before it even starts. You just watch the quarterback make history, and then get benched when it mattered most. That's not an exaggeration. That's not hype. That's what actually happened. In his third NFL start, Shedeur Sanders went out and delivered one of the best individual performances the Cleveland Browns have seen in decades. Over 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns through the air, 1 on the ground. And then when the game was on the line, when the Browns had a chance to close it out, his coach pulled him. Shannon Sharpe was stunned. Chad Johnson was stunned. Everyone watching? Also stunned. And let's be honest, this wasn't just questionable coaching. This was borderline sabotage. Because what else do you call it when a quarterback is playing that well? Setting records, controlling the tempo, delivering under pressure, and you still take the ball out of his hands with the game on the line. We're not talking about some fluke performance here. Sanders wasn't out there getting lucky. He was reading defenses, moving the ball with precision, throwing dimes, taking control like a veteran. The moment wasn't too big for him. He owned it. He did everything you'd want from a young QB, trying to prove he belongs. And then some. But when it came time for a 2-point conversion that could have shifted the momentum, Stefanski sat him. It was a moment that made no football sense. And that's exactly what Sharpe zeroed in on during nightcap. If you got a quarterback making franchise history, why are you sidelining him in the biggest moment of the game? Why are you giving the ball to anyone but the guy who got you there? It's the kind of decision that makes you start asking bigger questions. Because it wasn't just this one call. Earlier in the game, Stefanski went for 2 after a touchdown, way earlier than any coach normally would. Instead of kicking the extra point and tying it up, he went for a high-risk play that didn't need to happen. It didn't make sense then, and it makes even less sense now. That's why the tone from Sharpe and Johnson wasn't just frustration. It was suspicion. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. This felt intentional. Strategic, even, but not in a competitive sense. And yeah, the word sabotage came up not just once, multiple times. Because when you line up the decisions, early risky 2-point attempt, pulling your historic performing QB in crunch time, refusing to ride the hot hand, it starts to look like a pattern that doesn't line up with actually trying to win the game. Sharpe didn't mince words. He pointed directly to what this looked like: organizational sabotage. A coaching staff, or maybe even a front office, that isn't fully on board with Shedeur Sanders, that might not want him to succeed just yet, that might be more concerned with protecting other narratives, other players, or even draft positioning than letting a young quarterback thrive. And look, we've seen this play out before in the NFL. A late-round or undrafted quarterback starts outperforming expectations, and instead of being celebrated, they're sidelined. They're boxed out because they weren't supposed to be the guy. That's what makes this so maddening. Sanders was not a high draft pick. He came in without the hype machine that usually surrounds top-tier rookies. And yet, here he is, doing something no Browns quarterback has done since 1950. And still he gets benched? It's not hard to read between the lines. The truth is, organizations often have their own agendas. Coaches want to back the guy they chose. Front offices want to justify investments. And when a player disrupts that plan, especially someone unexpected, it becomes a problem. Even if that player is the best one on the field, Sharpe and Johnson laid it out plainly. This isn't just about this game. It's about the message this sends. To Sanders, to his teammates, to fans. If you can play that well and still not be trusted to finish the game, then what does it take? How do you earn that trust? And that's the dangerous part. Because quarterbacks need confidence. They need to know the people around them believe in them, especially when they're young and still learning the league. Instead, Sanders gets a message loud and clear. We don't trust you yet. That's not development. That's undermining. And the contrast couldn't be more obvious. Sanders' teammates, they believe in him. His family, rock solid support. You can see it. You can feel it. Everyone close to him knows he's a real deal. But the organization, the coaching staff, the people who should be building around him, they benched him with the game on the line. And it cost him the win. Because here's the kicker, they lost anyway. Stefanski's decision didn't just derail momentum. It directly contributed to the Browns walking off the field with an L. All that effort, all that production, wasted. And for what? To manage the game? To stick to the plan? Sharpe wasn't buying it. Johnson wasn't buying it. No one is. And now, the Browns aren't just dealing with a loss. They're dealing with narrative. A narrative they created. One where it looks like they're more concerned with politics than performance. Where they're treating one of the most promising young quarterbacks in the league like a liability instead of an asset. And if they don't get this under control, it's only going to get worse. Because the NFL is watching. Fans are watching. Players are watching. And when you make it clear that even historic performances won't earn trust, you lose credibility. You lose the locker room. You lose the fan base. And you lose games. At this point, the Browns have a decision to make. They can either double down on these bizarre decisions, or they can admit they were wrong, get behind Sanders, and build, because the clock is ticking. And quarterbacks like this don't come around often, especially not in Cleveland. So what's it going to be? Let us know what you think in the comments. Was Stefanski really trying to win that game, or was there something else going on behind the scenes? Does Shedeur Sanders deserve better? And how do you think this impacts the rest of the season? Drop your take. Hit that like button if you're tired of coaches wasting talent. And subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown of NFL chaos. Because if this is how Cleveland handles a breakout performance, what's next? Because that's a real question now. What's next? Because you don't just bench a quarterback after that kind of performance and walk away without consequences. The entire football world is watching. Every analyst, every former player, every fan who knows what a real breakout game looks like. Everyone saw what Shedeur Sanders did, and they also saw how the Browns treated it. So what happens now? Does Stefanski double down? Does he get up in front of the media and give one of those robotic coach-speak answers about play design or situational packages or trust in the system? Does he pretend like this wasn't a major decision? Like benching a historic-performing rookie quarterback in the final moments of a winnable game is normal? Because here's the truth. It's not normal. It's not even close. It's the kind of move that gets players looking sideways at the coaching staff. The kind that plants seeds of doubt in the locker room. The kind that turns potential franchise-altering win into a talking point on every sports show in the country. And right now, that's exactly what it is. A talking point. A controversy. A completely unnecessary mess. And what makes it worse is that the Browns had something. They had momentum. They had a moment. And most importantly, they had a quarterback who proved, right then and there, that he could lead a team, that he could rise above expectations, that he could handle the pressure. He delivered a statement game. And instead of letting him finish that statement, Stefanski cut him off mid-sentence. Shannon Sharpe said it directly. This isn't just bad football, this is a pattern. Because when you really start looking at it, the pieces start adding up. The early two-point conversion, the strange play calling, the choice to yank Sanders when everything was on the line. These aren't isolated incidents. They form a pattern of behavior that raises some uncomfortable questions. Questions about trust. Questions about internal agendas. Questions about whether this coaching staff is truly invested in this quarterback or just playing it safe with the status quo. that isn't working. And when you're a young quarterback, especially one drafted later, one without the usual media machine behind you, you can't afford these kinds of mixed signals, because the leash is always shorter. The margin for error is always thinner. And in this case, Sanders didn't even make an error. He did everything right. Everything. And still got pulled. So what's he supposed to take from that? Seriously, how does a player like Shedeur walk into the facility the next day and keep his head high? How does he go into film sessions, knowing he gave his best game so far and still wasn't trusted to close it out? That's how confidence starts to erode. That's how players lose trust, not just in themselves, but in the people calling the shots. Because if this wasn't about performance, then what was it about? Sharpe and Johnson weren't guessing. They've been in those locker rooms. They know how quickly these decisions can unravel the chemistry of a team. When guys see the best performer get benched for no clear reason, it changes things. It shakes the culture. It creates doubt. And in the NFL, doubt is poison. This league moves fast. It doesn't wait for clarity. It doesn't wait for explanations. It sees what's happening in real time. And what everyone saw, loud and clear, is that Sanders played one of the best games of any rookie this season and still got yanked. And we need to talk about the optics here, too. Let's be real. When a fifth-round rookie comes in and puts up those kinds of numbers, that should be the headline. That should be the Cinderella story. It should be, look at this guy proving the scouts wrong. Look at this guy forcing the team's hand. Look at this guy stepping up. But instead, the conversation has completely shifted. It's no longer about how good Sanders was. It's about why the Browns refused to let him finish the job. And that's a shame, because now his performance is tied to controversy, to second-guessing, to the idea that his success isn't even enough to overcome internal politics. This is where coaching has to evolve. This is where leadership matters. Stefanski had an opportunity to show that he was ready to pivot, that he was ready to throw out the script and go with what was working, that he was willing to trust the guy who earned it, but he didn't. And now he has to live with the fallout. Because once you make a call like that, once you take the game out of your quarterback's hands in that moment, you can't just undo it. You can't walk it back with a press conference or a quote about execution. The team felt it. The fans felt it. Sanders felt it. And the worst part? The Browns lost. So all that overthinking, all that strategy, all that control, it didn't even get the result they wanted. This is where you start losing people. This is how franchises dig themselves into deeper holes. Not because they lack talent, but because they don't know how to handle it when it shows up unexpectedly. Because let's be clear, Shedeur Sanders is the real deal. This isn't about potential anymore. It's about proof. He proved it on the field. He proved it under pressure. And if Cleveland doesn't see it, someone else will. That's what makes this such a critical moment. Because if the Browns continue down this path, if they keep sidelining Sanders in favor of safe, predictable decisions, they're going to lose him. Maybe not physically. Maybe not to another team just yet. But mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And once that trust is gone, you don't get it back. So here's where things stand. You got a franchise quarterback right there. You've got fans who are ready to believe again. You've got momentum. Real, earned momentum. For the first time in a long time. What you don't have. Leadership that seems willing to embrace it. And that has to change. The Browns need to make a choice, and they need to make it now. Either you rally around Shedeur Sanders and build on what he's already proven he can do, or you keep playing politics, keep micromanaging games, and keep losing. Because this isn't just about development anymore. This is about respect. Respect for the game. Respect for performance. And respect for a player who earned his moment and was denied it anyway. The thing about moments like this, moments where a young star clearly earns a spotlight, only to get shoved into the shadows, is that they don't just disappear. They don't fade away with the next news cycle. They linger. They fester. They come back when the next fourth quarter rolls around. And everyone remembers the last time the coach made a call that nobody could justify. And that's where Kevin Stefanski is right now. Every coach has their defining moment. And this might be his. Because this wasn't just a mistake in clock management or a poorly timed timeout. This wasn't about a misread on the sideline. This was about making a conscious decision to take the ball out of the hands of your best player at the most critical time of the game. That's not a slip-up. That's a statement. And the statement it made? Loud and clear. We don't trust Shedeur Sanders. Let's be honest. If that's the vibe inside the Browns' locker room, they've got way bigger problems than just losing a close game. Because Shedeur wasn't just performing. He was elevating the team. Every possession he was out there, he gave them a chance. He looked confident. He looked collected. He looked like a leader. And he was proving in real time that his draft position didn't define him. That the fifth-round label was just that, a label, one that had nothing to do with his ability to command an NFL offense, to stay composed under pressure, to make smart reads, to escape the pocket when needed, and punish defenses both through the air and on the ground. Sharpe and Akasinko were hyped for a reason. They weren't throwing around compliments just to be nice. They've seen what greatness looks like, and what they saw in Shedeur wasn't luck. It was skill. It was preparation. It was poise. So when Stefanski made the call to bench him during that crucial two-point attempt, it didn't just feel like a mistake. It felt personal. And when you pull a quarterback who's on fire, there's only one way that's interpreted by players, fans, and commentators alike. You don't believe in him. And maybe that's the most dangerous thing about all of this. Because once it becomes clear that an organization doesn't believe in a player, that player has to start asking, why am I here? Especially when that player is delivering. We've all seen quarterbacks flame out early in their careers because they were thrown into the fire too soon, because they didn't have protection, because they didn't have weapons, because they didn't have structure. But that's not what's happening here. Shedeur had structure. He had a game plan. He had results. And still he got benched. This wasn't about protecting him. This wasn't about resting him. This wasn't about player development. This was about control, about a coaching staff that didn't want a narrative to get away from them, about a franchise that might be more interested in preserving its internal power dynamics than supporting the guy actually winning games. And that's the quiet part Sharpe said out loud. Is this sabotage? Because how else do you describe a series of coaching decisions that consistently go against logic, against momentum, and against a player performing best on the field? Going for two early in the game when a simple extra point would have tied things up? That's not strategy. That's hubris. That's a coach trying to prove he's the smartest guy in the room. And spoiler alert, he's not. Especially when that call ends up haunting you later in the game, right when you need that extra point. Then the most egregious call of the night, pulling Sanders during a moment that should have been his. The game was on the line. The huddle should have been his. The chance to lead, his. The weight of the moment, his to carry. That's how quarterbacks grow. That's how franchises find their leaders. But instead of giving him the ball, Stefanski gave him a message. We don't trust you to finish. And that message didn't just hit Sanders. It hit everyone watching. It hit every fan who's been begging for the Browns to get it right. It hit every player on that roster who's been busting it all season long to turn things around. You don't build a winning culture by yanking your best player off the field when it matters. You build it by trusting him, by letting him lead, by backing him. Sharpe and Johnson nailed it when they said this kind of decision doesn't just impact one game. It impacts careers. Because when a young quarterback has a performance like that, the last thing you want to do is shake his confidence. But that's exactly what happened. The rug got pulled out from under him right as he was about to stand tallest. And for what? For a play that didn't work. For a result that ended in a loss. For a coach who now has to sit in front of the media and pretend like any of this made sense. Meanwhile, Sanders goes home with one of the best games of his life and nothing to show for it. No win. No game ball. No, this is your team now moment. Just silence. And the silence is loud. This whole situation highlights one of the darkest sides of NFL politics. Because talent doesn't always get rewarded. Results don't always guarantee trust. And sometimes the players who earn the most are the ones who get held back the hardest. Because they weren't the ones the team planned to succeed. Shedeur Sanders wasn't handed anything. He earned it. And that makes him dangerous to the status quo. Because when a player comes in and outperforms expectations, especially when they weren't the media darling or the high-priced free agent, it forces the people in power to pivot. And some coaches just aren't built for that. Some coaches don't want to adapt. They want control, even if that control comes at the cost of a win. So now the pressure's on. Not on Sanders. He's done more than enough. The pressure's on the Browns organization to explain themselves, to prove that they actually want to win, to show that they recognize talent when it's right in front of them, even if it didn't come in the package they were expecting. Because if they don't, they're not just going to lose games. They're going to lose players. They're going to lose fans. And most of all, they're going to lose the trust that takes years to rebuild. And trust me, once it's gone, let us know what you think in the comments. Should Shedeur Sanders be the clear starter going forward? Was Stefanski's decision about control, ego, or something even worse? And where does Cleveland go from here? Hit that like button if you're tired of seeing talent wasted. Share this with someone who still believes coaching is about earning trust, not managing perception. And subscribe for more breakdowns of the chaos behind the curtain in the NFL. Because if this is how you treat your most promising quarterback in decades, maybe the real problem isn't on the field,